Welcome to Revenge with Nora. Do my laundry and have dinner ready by 7. You're home all day anyway. My brother said that to me from the hallway, barely looking up from his phone, like he was leaving a note for a housekeeper rather than talking to the person whose name was on the lease. I stood in the kitchen, spatula in hand, and I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I had been waiting for exactly this moment, the one where his arrogance finally said the quiet part out loud. My name is Maya Calloway. I'm 31 years old. I own a small event planning business I built from a single laptop and a lot of late nights. And this is the story of how my brother moved into my apartment for just a couple months and somehow decided, 6 months later, that he was the one running the place. My brother's name is Derek. He's 28. Smart enough to charm anyone in a room, not disciplined enough to keep a job for longer than a season. When he called me last spring, his voice had that particular softness he only uses when he needs something low, a little tired, just vulnerable enough to make you feel guilty for hesitating. He'd lost his apartment lease. His roommate had moved out suddenly, and the landlord wasn't renewing for one person. He had interviews lined up, he said. 2 solid leads. He just needed somewhere to land while things came together. 6 weeks, maybe 8. He'd cover groceries, keep things clean, stay out of my way. I want to be honest about something, because the people in the comments of stories like mine always ask, why did you let it go on so long? And the answer isn't simple. Part of it was love. Part of it was the version of Derek I kept hoping would show up, the one from when we were kids, before he learned that being charming was easier than being responsible. And part of it was that I told myself if I was patient enough, generous enough, the situation would fix itself. It didn't fix itself, it expanded. By month 2, the groceries he promised to cover became groceries I bought while he Venmo requested me for his share of a dinner I hadn't been invited to. By month 3, he had a rotating cast of friends coming through my living room on weeknights, eating my food, leaving rings on my coffee table, staying until midnight while I had 5 a.m. client calls. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, not because I was afraid, but because I needed one room in my own home that felt like mine. He wasn't working. The 2 solid leads evaporated, he said, because the companies restructured. Then there was another lead, then a freelance project that paid once and then stopped. Every week there was a reason, and every reason was someone else's fault. The market. His old boss who gave a bad reference. Bad timing. Never Derek. I paid for everything. The electricity bill that doubled when he started working from home, except he wasn't working, he was gaming. The Wi-Fi upgrade he said we needed. The streaming services he added to my account. Small things, each one reasonable on its own, that added up to a very clear picture I kept refusing to look at directly. The morning he told me to do his laundry and have dinner ready by 7 was a Tuesday. I had just gotten off a 90-minute call with a corporate client, closed a contract worth more than Derek had earned in the past year combined, and I was making lunch because I hadn't eaten since 6 in the morning. He walked past me in the hallway carrying a gym bag, freshly showered, heading out to meet friends, and he said those words the way you say them to someone who works for you. I turned back to the stove. I'm not your housekeeper, I said evenly. Make your own dinner. He laughed. Actually laughed. Relax. I'm just saying it would be nice. You're already cooking. I'm cooking for myself. He shrugged, unbothered, and left. I stood there for a moment. Then I took a breath, turned off the burner, and picked up my phone. I texted my mother. I'll be at Sunday dinner. I have some things I want to talk through as a family. She replied in under a minute. Wonderful. Derek mentioned you've been stressed. We'll have a nice time. I put the phone face down on the counter. Derek had already been managing the narrative. Of course he had. What Derek didn't know was that I had spent the previous 2 weeks quietly documenting everything. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. I had screenshots of every Venmo transaction, every charge he'd added to shared accounts, every message where he'd promised to contribute and then gone silent. I had a folder on my phone labeled apartment that told a story even he couldn't talk his way out of. And I had already spoken to my building manager about what removing someone from a lease as an informal occupant actually required. I was not going to Sunday dinner unprepared. Sunday came with that specific Midwestern overcast sky that makes everything feel a little heavier than it is. My mother lives 40 minutes from me, in the house where Derek and I grew up. I drove alone. Derek had gotten a ride with a friend and arrived before me, which I suspected was intentional. He always liked to set the room before I walked into it. When I got there, he was already at the kitchen table with my mother, the two of them laughing about something, and my uncle was in the living room watching football. My mother hugged me with one arm, the other holding a dish towel, and said, "You look tired, sweetheart." "I'm fine," I said. "Thank you for having me." Derek gave me a look across the kitchen that was almost a smile. Almost. Dinner was the usual. My mother's pot roast, bread she'd made that morning, the good dishes that came out for company and family. My uncle talked about work. My mother refilled glasses before they were empty. Derek told a story about a hiking trip he'd taken the weekend before a weekend trip. I noted that he hadn't mentioned paying for, and everyone laughed at all the right moments. Then my mother set down her fork and said, gently, the way she says things she's been rehearsing, "Maya, Derek tells me things have been a little tense at the apartment. That you've been under a lot of pressure with work and sometimes you take it out on him." I looked at Derek. He looked at his plate. "Did he tell you anything else?" I asked. My mother frowned slightly. "He said you've been making him feel unwelcome. That you've been tracking everything he does." "Tracking," I repeated. His words. I nodded slowly. Put my napkin on the table. "Mom, how long do you think Derek has been staying with me?" He said about 2 months. Maybe a little more. 6 months, I said. He moved in the second week of April. It is now the third week of October. The table got quieter. My uncle muted the television in the other room, which meant he could hear us, which was fine. Let him hear. My mother looked at Derek. "Is that right?" He shifted in his chair. Time moved fast. "I've been working on things." "What things?" I asked. Not unkindly. Genuinely. Because I would love to know, because from where I've been sitting, here is what I've watched happen. I picked up my phone. I had the folder open and ready. April, you moved in. I covered the security deposit difference when your deposit from your old place took 6 weeks to return. May. I added you to the grocery order because you said you'd pay me back. You paid me back for 1 week. June. You added 3 streaming subscriptions to my account. I have the charges here, and you had friends over 11 times, which I know because I have a calendar and I work from home, and I remember every single morning I couldn't take a client call because the living room was occupied. Derek's jaw tightened. You kept a calendar of when I had people over? I kept a calendar of my work schedule. You were a recurring interruption. I kept my voice steady. Even. July and August. I paid the electric bill both months. It was $230 higher than my pre-Derek average. I have both statements here. September. You borrowed my car for what you said was a job interview. I found out from my neighbor that you drove 4 friends to a concert 3 hours away. I have the mileage. The room was very quiet now. My mother's hands were folded in her lap. Maya. I'm not done, I said gently. I want to be fair. So I want to show you the full picture. I scrolled to the Venmo records. Total transferred to Derek over 6 months for what I can only describe as keeping him alive and comfortable in my home. $4,200. That's rent he hasn't paid, groceries, utilities, the concert mileage. I calculated gas and 2 months of his phone bill because his card was declined, and he asked me to cover it temporarily. I set the phone face up on the table so she could see the screen. Temporarily was 4 months ago. Derek laughed, but it was hollow. She's making it sound like I'm some kind of freeloader. Are you paying rent? My uncle called from the living room. Derek didn't answer. My mother picked up my phone. She looked at the numbers for a long moment. Then she set it down and looked at her son, and I watched the expression on her face shift not to anger, not yet, but to something more uncomfortable than that. Recognition. Derek, she said quietly. Did you tell me it was 2 months because you knew I'd say something if I knew the truth? He leaned back in his chair. I didn't think it was a big deal. You told me Maya was being difficult, she said. You told me she was making you feel like a burden when you were already struggling. She was. She was supporting you, my mother said. The words landed flat and final. She was supporting you, and you came to her table and told her to have your dinner ready by 7. He looked at me sharply. You told her that? It happened, I said. For a moment, he looked like he might try to explain it context, tone. I was just joking, but something in the room had shifted in a way he couldn't charm his way back from. My mother knew. My uncle knew. The numbers were on the table in plain sight. I think, my mother said slowly, that you owe your sister an apology. She's being dramatic. Derek. Her voice was quiet, but it stopped him. You moved into her home and you treated it like a hotel you didn't have to pay for. That is not something I raised you to do. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed back from the table, not storming, just retreating, and went out to the back porch. The door didn't slam. That almost made it worse, the deflation of it, the absence of the fight I'd half expected. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I looked at her. Would you have wanted to hear it? She didn't answer right away. Which was its own answer. I kept hoping he'd turn it around, I said. And every time I thought about saying something, I told myself maybe next month. Maybe when he got the job. I think I let it go on too long because I didn't want to be the one who gave up on him. You didn't give up on him, she said. You just stopped disappearing in the process. I hadn't expected that from her. It loosened something in my chest I hadn't realized I'd been holding. He has 2 weeks to find somewhere else to go, I said. I've already talked to my building manager. I'm not asking for the money back. I'm just asking for my apartment back. She nodded slowly. Okay, I said. The pot roast went cold while we sat there, and nobody suggested reheating it. My uncle came to the doorway at some point and said, simply, "Good for you, kid," and went back to the game. Derek didn't come back to the table that night. I drove home alone in the dark, and for the first time in 6 months, the 40-minute drive felt short. The 2 weeks that followed were the strangest kind of quiet. Derek came home that night after I was already in my room, and I heard him moving around the kitchen, heard the television go on low, heard the sounds of someone who has run out of easy options and is slowly beginning to understand it. He didn't speak to me directly for the first 3 days. On the 4th day, he knocked on my office door while I was on a call. I held up one finger weight and finished the call. And when I opened the door, he was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking younger than 28. I'm applying to stuff, he said. Seriously this time. Good, I said. I didn't realize. He stopped. I mean, I knew. I just didn't let myself really look at it. I leaned against the doorframe. I know. I said that thing about dinner and I meant it as a joke. Kind of, I repeated. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. It wasn't funny. No. He uncrossed his arms. I'll be out by the 1st. I found a room in a shared house. It's not great, but it's mine. That's a good start, I said. And I meant it. He nodded, started to turn away, then paused. Mom called me twice. She was. He made a face. She had a lot to say. I'll bet. She's more on your side than I expected. I looked at him for a moment. She's not on a side. She's just seeing clearly. Try it sometime. Something passed over his face that wasn't quite a smile but was in the neighborhood. Then he went back down the hallway, and I closed my office door, and I sat down at my desk and breathed. The 1st came and went. True to his word, Derek moved his things into 3 duffel bags and a single cardboard box. The smallness of it was quietly startling and carried them down to the car of a friend who'd come to help. I stood in the kitchen drinking coffee while he made 2 trips. On the last trip, he stopped at the front door. I put $40 cash on the counter. For the electric bill. I looked at the counter. 4 tens, slightly crumpled, like he'd pulled them from his wallet on impulse. Not $4,000. 40. Thank you, I said, and I meant it exactly as much as the amount deserved, which is to say sincerely but without drama. He nodded. Take care of yourself, Maya. You too, Derek. The door closed. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the sound of my apartment, just my refrigerator hum, just my upstairs neighbor's footsteps, just the city outside my window going about its Tuesday. I opened both windows in the living room even though it was cold. I wanted fresh air in every corner. That afternoon, I rearranged the living room furniture back to the way I'd had it before he moved in. I put the throw pillows where I liked them. I made tea and drank it sitting in the armchair by the window, reading, with no background television, no voices, no one's schedule imposed on my afternoon. Peace, it turns out, doesn't announce itself. It just settles. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself back into work with a focus I'd lost somewhere around month 2 of living with background chaos. I signed 2 new clients in November. I started a mentorship program through my local Chamber of Commerce for women launching service businesses. I started sleeping through the night again. My mother called every week. Our conversations were different now, more honest, less careful. She told me one evening that she'd sat Derek down and had a long talk about patterns, about how the family had always let him slide because he was the youngest, because he was charming, because it was easier. She sounded tired when she said it, but also clear-eyed. I enabled it, she said. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. You didn't know how far it went, I said. I didn't let myself know, she said. There's a difference. That sentence stayed with me for a long time. 6 weeks after Derek moved out, my phone buzzed late on a Wednesday evening. It was him. I got the job. The one at the logistics company. I start Monday. I set the phone down and smiled at the ceiling for a moment. Then I picked it back up. Congratulations. That's real, Derek. Hold on to it. He sent back a thumbs up, then, after a pause, a second message. I'm sorry it took me so long to act right. I know that's not enough, but I mean it. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about everything I could say about the $4,000, about the laundry comment, about 6 months of my peace and my patience going somewhere he didn't value. But none of that needed to be said again. It had already been said at the table with the numbers in plain sight and my mother's hand over mine. It's a start, I typed back. That's all anyone needs to begin. He didn't reply after that. He didn't need to. I put my phone on the charger and walked to the window, looking out at the street below, at the ordinary Wednesday night movement of people coming home, getting takeout, walking dogs. I thought about how long I had organized my life around someone else's instability. How I had made myself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, and called it love. It was love. That was the complicated part. But love without limits isn't generosity, it's just slow erosion. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even particularly sad. I was just here, in my apartment, in my life, with the furniture where I wanted it and the windows open and no one's dinner to make by 7. That felt like enough. That felt like more than enough. That felt like exactly where I was supposed to be.